My wife is cheating on me, and I honestly don't care at all. I'm Jacob, 29, and I've been married to my wife Emily, also 29, for 5 years now. Altogether, we've been together for about 7 years. We first got together during my senior year of college. We ran in the same circle of friends, although I'd known her for a couple of years by then. She was actually the sister of one of the girls at our college. At the time, I was just supposed to be her rebound. She had just come out of a 3-year relationship and even lived with the guy, who I was sort of friends with. Things had been rocky between them for a while, and moving in together didn't help. Things only got worse until he finally kicked her out of their apartment. 3 days later, she was on my couch, and, well, let's just say things got physical. Emily had barely been single for more than a few months since high school. Every guy she dated seemed to have some issues, especially around intimacy, and with my reputation, she figured I'd be a good pick to have some fun with while she enjoyed her newfound freedom. She wasn't really looking for a serious relationship and just wanted something casual, maybe a friends with benefits kind of thing. I wasn't complaining. The sex was incredible, but the truth is, I had always had a bit of a thing for her. I never acted on it before because she was with someone else, but from that first night on, I was hooked. Luckily for me, Emily wasn't the best at sticking to her own boundaries. It took her a while, about a month, to actually kiss me, but anytime I asked her out on a date, she always said yes. Pretty soon, we were spending every night we could together. After about 6 weeks, she asked me to be exclusive with her, and I didn't hesitate to agree. After college, I landed my dream job as a social media manager, and Emily had been working as a secretary since she was 19. Around that time, she had just secured a job at a high school. Those first couple of years, while we were dating and later engaged, were a blast. We connected on every level. Things moved pretty fast between us, to be honest. We dated for a year, got engaged for another year, and then got married. The first year of marriage was solid. We took a small vacation, bought a house, and started talking about kids. We both agreed to wait until we were closer to 30 before starting a family. Then COVID hit, and things began to shift. I started working from home, while Emily's job as a secretary kept her going to the school building every day. It was during this time that we started to drift apart a little. For me, the whole situation was pretty easy. I was still working from the comfort of our home office in the basement. Keeping the house clean was a breeze since it was just the two of us and she wasn't home much during the day. With all that extra time on my hands, I got really into GTA Online. It became my new hobby, and I started playing a lot. By the time Emily got home, I was usually deep into my game. I tried to get her interested, but video games just weren't her thing. Since then, I've expanded into other games, so I spend quite a bit of time online every day. It was also around this time that some communication issues between us became more obvious. These problems have only worsened over the last 4 years since I started working from home. For example, for almost 3 years now, Emily has been telling me I don't communicate enough with her. But that's just not true. I tell her everything that happens to me, but to be honest, there's not much to say. I work from home, and my main hobby is here at home too, so I don't really get why it's such a big deal. I think she's finally starting to get that because she hasn't brought it up in a while. That's just one of the things we've been dealing with over the last few years. She's also always telling me I don't care about her or support her, which is completely unfair. Obviously I care. I married her, didn't I? If I didn't care, I wouldn't have done that. I make way more money than she does now, but I rarely spend it on myself. I actually encourage her to buy the things she wants. She buys a ton of stuff every month. Honestly, we could survive just on my salary, but she chooses to keep working. I do almost all the housework too, so I have no idea what she expects from me. Whenever we try to talk about our issues, it feels like I'm expected to just sit there and listen. She never wants to address the things that bother me. Instead, she accuses me of being defensive or hijacking the conversation. She claims I only bring up my problems after she starts the conversation, and then it's like I open the floodgates. But it's not like that at all. It's the same old issues I've always had with her. The real problem is that she never says what she actually wants. I've told her over and over that I'm not going to pick up on vague hints. Most of the time, I have no clue what she's trying to say. She keeps asking me to be vulnerable. But what does that even mean? I'm not just going to sit there and start crying for no reason. The clearest sign to me that Emily doesn't care about me anymore is the complete lack of physical intimacy. Our sex life started to fade right when COVID hit. The frequency kept dropping, and it's only gotten worse over the past 4 years. I was always the one trying to initiate things, but after being rejected over and over, I just gave up. Nowadays, I don't even bother going to bed with her. Instead, I crash on the couch down here in my office most nights. Despite our issues, we've both had some big changes in the past few years. 3 years ago, I switched jobs. I'm still a social media manager, but I moved from the small company I was working for to a much larger one. There were plenty of reasons for the change. More money, better benefits, and the bonus of working 100% from home. My old job had plans for a hybrid model once COVID restrictions eased up. Around the same time, Emily also changed jobs and started working as a secretary at another big company. About 6 months ago, a new guy named Matt, who's 23, started working at Emily's company. That was also when she got a new iPhone, and like always, I helped her set it up. But this time, I had a gut feeling that she was bad-mouthing me to her mom and sister. It just felt like their attitude toward me had turned sour. So, I did something I'm not proud of. While setting up her phone, I installed a few spying apps and synced everything to the cloud. From there, I linked it to my tablet. Sure enough, I saw her venting about our marriage to her sister. But her sister didn't really trash talk me, she just gave advice. Then, about a month ago, I saw her start messaging Matt. It began as regular office chatter, but it didn't take long for things to turn personal. They started talking about books they liked, TV shows, and hobbies, and these conversations went on for hours. It made me suspicious, but part of me thought maybe she just needed a friend, and if that kept her off my back, fine. The last 2 weeks, I noticed she was in a much better mood, and that's when their conversations took a sharp turn into inappropriate territory. It escalated fast. One night, they went from discussing the Hunger Games to exchanging graphic details about what they wanted to do to each other. It only got worse from there. Last Wednesday, they met up outside of work for the first time. Her excuse was beyond lame. She told me she had to work late, which is unusual for her since she typically works 8:30 to 5 p.m., and she wasn't sure how long she'd be stuck at the office. Even if I hadn't known what she was really up to, that excuse would have set off alarms. She works for this high-level guy at her company who is one of the kindest older gentlemen I've ever met. I've met him twice, and she's never once complained about him. And so for her to suddenly have to work late for an undetermined amount of time, after 2 years of never being asked to do so, huge red flag. She gave me that line on Monday, and I decided to play it cool and see where it went. I didn't want to confront her just yet and have her backtrack with some nonsense like, it was never physical. So, Wednesday rolls around, and she doesn't get home until 8:15 p.m. She went straight to the shower, which was odd, since she usually grabs a snack or scrolls through her phone for a bit when she gets home. Afterward, she tried coming down to my office to chat, but I wasn't interested. I knew what she had done and wasn't about to make her feel better about it. Funny enough, ignoring her seemed to put her at ease, which probably helped her relax after whatever guilt she might have been feeling. The weirdest part is, I don't feel much of anything about her cheating. You'd think I'd be angry or hurt, but honestly, I just feel indifferent. That night, they exchanged a few texts, but she wasn't as chatty and seemed like she didn't want to talk. By the next day, though, they were back to chatting a lot, and she told him how amazing the night before had been. She also mentioned she was planning to tell me that late Wednesdays were going to become a regular thing. Sure enough, she told me that yesterday. I couldn't be happier about this whole situation. This isn't some one-time fling. She's having a full-blown affair, and I've got all the proof I need. She doesn't have any power over me anymore. I don't care what she does, so if she's trying to hurt me, she's failed. Now, I can leave this marriage without being the bad guy. She can try to spin the story however she wants, but at the end of the day, she's the one who cheated. I know I've let myself go a bit physically, and sure, there are things I could work on, but that's normal. Everyone has their ups and downs, but that doesn't make it okay to go out and cheat. If she was that unhappy, she should have gotten a divorce first. I was planning to spend today looking up divorce attorneys. Emily came into my office about 20 minutes ago and asked if I wanted to go on a hike and have a picnic. I'm not sure what she's playing at. She looked genuinely surprised when I agreed to go. Now I'm debating whether I should drop the bomb on her while we're out there or wait until we get back. Part of me thinks she's about to ask for a divorce anyway. I didn't end up saying anything during the hike, and neither did Emily. It was actually a really good day. We hiked, we joked around, and we had real conversations. It felt like we were on a first date all over again. She had packed a picnic filled with my favorite snacks, and I just kept waiting for her to ask for a divorce or confess to the affair and beg me to forgive her. But that didn't happen. When the day wrapped up, we just drove home. Once we got back, I headed down to my office and jumped on a game. She went to take a shower. I was in the middle of playing when she came in and said, "I'm ordering takeout from the Japanese place. I'm going to watch Abigail. I'd like it if you watched with me, but you don't have to if you're busy. Either way, what do you want to eat?" I told her. She left the room, and I went back to my game. I planned on just gaming through the night since I had already spent a lot of time with her during the day. But then I started feeling a little guilty about not watching the movie with her. So when she came back with the food, I left the game and joined her. We ate while watching Abigail together, and afterward, she slid over and cuddled up next to me on the couch. Honestly, I couldn't even remember the last time we had a day or night like that. The next day, Sunday, I was gaming again, but I started to feel kind of bored with it, so I went to our little home gym, if you can even call it that. We've got a treadmill and a set of dumbbells that go from 5 Ls up to 50 Ls. I worked out for the first time in probably 3 years. I went back to gaming afterward, but I'll admit, the workout felt good. On Monday, when she got home, I came upstairs and asked her how her day was. We ended up talking for 2 hours, just about random stuff, work, her friends, things like that. She made us dinner, and then she picked out a new show for us to binge watch together. We didn't even make it halfway through the second episode before we were getting it on right there on the living room couch. At that point, it had been at least 5 months since we'd had sex. Well, for me anyway, Tuesday played out much the same way. I didn't know what was going on, but Emily was putting real effort into our relationship, and in return, I started doing the same. When Wednesday came around, I wondered if she'd be working late again. I kept an eye on her messages during the day, and although they were sparse, the few she did send made it pretty clear she planned to head to Matt's place that night. And sure enough, that's exactly where she went. While she was gone for those 2 hours, I sat and thought about it. I couldn't figure out why it didn't bother me. I mean, I knew she was with another guy right then, but I wasn't angry. Honestly, I felt nothing at all. It was no different to me than if she had gone to get her nails done or had coffee with a friend. When she got home that night, I was ready to confront her. I had no doubt about what had happened. The text Matt sent her on her way home left nothing to the imagination. Just like last week, she went straight to the shower when she got back. I waited for her in the bedroom. When she came out wrapped in a towel, I had a somber look on my face. I kept thinking about how great the last few days had been, but I knew I needed to confront her. But then I saw her and she looked amazing. She actually looked happy, which was a big change from the sulking I'd gotten used to. I had noticed her attitude slowly shift after the affair started. She was becoming more like the Emily I fell in love with 7 years ago. When she saw me, her face turned to concern, real concern. She quickly walked over, put her hand on my back, and asked me in the sweetest voice what was wrong. I looked at her and, for a second, I could feel the tears welling up, but I pushed them down. I decided not to say anything. Instead, I told her I had a rough day at work and just needed some reassurance. She gave me a shoulder rub and we talked about it for a while. I got up to grab her some food I had prepped earlier, and as I was leaving the room, she said, "You know all those times I asked you to open up to me, to be vulnerable? This is what I meant. You don't have to deal with everything alone. I want to be part of your life." I just nodded and walked out. After that night, I started really reflecting on our relationship and myself as a whole. Ever since COVID hit, I hadn't done anything. I barely talked to my parents, I had lost touch with all of my friends, and I had completely let myself go, which was weird for a guy who used to be the fit guy. I decided that if Emily was going to put effort into fixing our relationship, I should do the same. I started looking into relationship books, and I even designed a workout plan for myself. That was almost 6 months ago, and I can honestly say I don't think I've ever been happier. I've really come to enjoy the routine we've settled into. Sundays and Fridays are do-your-own-thing nights. Mondays and Tuesdays we hang out at home together. One night she picks what we watch, and the other night I get to choose. Wednesday is her working late day, and I've reconnected with some old friends. We've started a weekly D&D night, something I'd never played before but have really gotten into. They're all seasoned players, but I'm catching on. Honestly, I like it because I'm usually out later than Emily is on those nights, which suits me just fine. Thursdays and every other Saturday are our date nights. On Thursdays, we typically go to a movie or grab dinner, and Saturdays we do something a little more fun, like visiting a museum or going for a hike. The alternate Saturdays are for us to do our own thing. I sometimes go out, but most of the time I use that day to get in some gaming. I don't game much during the week now, and instead I've gotten into pretty good shape by replacing it with regular workouts. As for Emily, she could be doing any number of things on those days. Sometimes she's with Matt. It annoys me a little when she lies about where she's going, but I just smile and nod. I know what she's actually up to. She also uses that time to visit family or just get some alone time. I know people are going to ask how I can be okay with her cheating. Honestly, I don't have a good answer. It just doesn't bother me. Someone reached out after my last post and suggested that maybe I'm polyamorous, but I don't think that's it. I don't have any interest in pursuing anyone else. For whatever reason, I'm indifferent to the fact that she's unfaithful. And I mean indifferent. I've had people in the comments imply that I get off on this, but that's not true. I don't feel any excitement or pleasure from it, and there's no jealousy or embarrassment. If more people knew, maybe I'd feel differently, but for now, it's private and I don't feel anything. I still hope the affair eventually ends. If it does, I won't bring it up and we can just carry on with our marriage. I know at some point I'll have to put a stop to it, especially when we start thinking about kids. I'm not having kids unless we're 100% committed, but for now, I'm going to keep enjoying life. Before I get into the current problem, I'll give a quick update on what life has been like for the past year and a half since my last post. It's been great. Emily and I have really reconnected as a couple. We've gone on a few vacations. I've spent more time with friends and family, and our communication has never been better. She's still seeing Matt, and yes, she's still lying about it. I don't pay much attention to it anymore. In fact, I haven't checked her messages in over a year. I honestly don't know how she keeps it up. Based on what I used to see and assuming things are the same, she sleeps with Matt once a week. I know firsthand that she sleeps with me 3 times a week, not to mention the random messing around we do. That's not to say we don't still have arguments or disagreements. Sometimes our old issues creep back in. The difference is now we talk them out, get over them quickly, and respect each other's feelings in the process. Our current problem started when I noticed Emily had been spending a lot of time on the phone with her friend Ashley. After the 3rd or 4th day of her being on the phone for over an hour, I finally asked what was going on. Turns out Ashley just found out her husband, Eric, had been cheating on her for the past 3 months. They'd been married for 10 years, and to make things worse, Eric's affair partner is Ashley's 19-year-old first cousin, Brianna. Ashley's 19-year-old first cousin, Brianna. I went back and looked through Emily's messages with Ashley, and unless she's said something over the phone, Emily hasn't told her that she's been having an affair too. Everything would have been fine if I'd just kept my mouth shut, but when Emily went on a rant about how awful Eric was for cheating, I couldn't help it. I was shaking my head with a stupid grin on my face when she noticed. She snapped. "What, you don't agree?" I couldn't stop myself. I blurted out, "You're one to talk?" Her whole demeanor shifted, and she started pressing me about what I meant. At first, I tried to backtrack, apologize, and deny it, but she wouldn't let it go. She just kept pushing. That's when I told her that I knew about her affair with Matt. She asked how long I'd known, and I told her I'd known from the very beginning, back when it was just innocent work messages. She wanted to know why I'd let it go on, and I told her, because I didn't care. That's when she broke down crying and ran into our bedroom, locking the door behind her. By then it was pretty late, so I texted her, trying to get her to talk. I wanted to explain what just happened. She only sent me one message that said, "Please leave me alone. I need time." For the first time in over a year, I slept on the couch in the basement. The next morning, she left for work earlier than usual. I checked her messages and saw that she had contacted Matt the night before to end things with him. He was blowing up her phone, demanding answers, but she was blocking him on everything he tried. When she got home that night, I was waiting for her. She just glanced at me and went straight to our bedroom, locking the door behind her. I ended up sleeping on the couch again and woke up around 1 a.m. to find her lying next to me, quietly crying. I held her for about 15 or 20 minutes while she let it all out. She started apologizing repeatedly and putting herself down. I told her to stop, that she wasn't all these horrible things she was saying. I explained that I knew about the affair all along, and I still didn't think less of her. I still loved her completely. She asked me how I knew, so I came clean about the surveillance apps I had installed. That revelation hurt her, but she was also conflicted. On one hand, she felt like I had invaded her privacy in a way she couldn't easily process. On the other, she was betraying me, and a part of her felt like she deserved it. I asked why she had locked herself away for 2 days, and she said, "When you said, 'I don't care,' it all just hit me at once. I spent years thinking you didn't care about me, and it was too much in that moment." It was an intense and emotional conversation, but eventually, we both fell asleep together on the couch. She took the next 2 days off work, and we went through everything that had happened in our relationship. We talked about how things fell apart after COVID, how indifferent I had become, and my refusal to change. We also discussed the surveillance of her phone and the ways I had changed over the last couple of years. We spent hours talking about her affair. More details than I expected or even wanted, but surprisingly, I finally started to feel some emotional response. I asked her why she had started the affair in the first place. She told me it was because Matt paid attention to her, and she honestly thought we were headed for divorce. She loved the attention and validation, especially after feeling ignored for years. She remembered how she would try to get me to do things with her, even stuff I used to enjoy, but I would usually turn her down, and when I didn't, it felt like I was rushing through it just to get back home and back to my games. I had to admit, she was right about how I'd been acting during that time. She wasn't trying to justify her behavior, just explaining what was going on in her mind back then. After the first time she slept with him, she was sure we needed to divorce, but then she thought of giving our relationship one last test, which was why she invited me on that hike and picnic. She never expected me to say yes. When I agreed, she was shocked, but figured I'd try to rush through it. Then I didn't, and we ended up having an amazing day. After that, she decided to keep putting in effort, and suddenly, I started responding and making an effort too. At that point, I had to ask, why did you keep the affair going after things got better between us? She didn't hold back. I was just selfish. I liked having it all and didn't want to give it up. Honestly, I feel bad for stringing Matt along. I'm pretty sure he's in love with me. I pressed further, and how did you feel about him? She answered, I definitely have feelings for him, but not like I do for you. I guess you could call it love-like, but really what I loved was the attention. I didn't want to give it up. Once I had you back and we were enjoying each other again, I knew I should end things with Matt, but I just didn't want to. I was spending time with the man I loved, which meant the world to me, but I was also selfish and let Matt keep showering me with attention. I kept telling myself all the usual excuses. Coming clean would only hurt you. I was in too deep. I deserved it, and so on. I asked, did you ever feel guilty? All the time, she admitted, but having it all felt more important to me. So, did you actually have it all? I questioned. In my mind, yeah, I think I did, she said. I had you and we were enjoying each other more than we had since we first started dating. I had my space and free time, and I also had this guy who was giving me all the attention I craved. You and Matt were so different. I liked sleeping with both of you. We were back to our wild, kinky, crazy stuff that you know I love, and Matt was the opposite. Simple, attentive, kind of sensually vanilla. Not that we don't do passion, but it was just different. By the end of that conversation, I was drained. We had several more talks throughout the weekend. By Sunday afternoon, Matt was still trying to get in touch with Emily. I told her she should call him and give him some kind of closure. She agreed. When she called him, she put the phone on speaker, and I stayed silent, just listening. She explained to Matt that I had found out about the affair, but she didn't mention that I had known the whole time. She told him that she was fully committing to our marriage and that we were going to work through our issues. She admitted to me that once things improved between us, she stopped talking to him about our marriage. He begged her to reconsider, saying he loved her. You could tell he truly did. He had completely bought into the idea that they would end up together, thinking she was just waiting for the right time to divorce me. Honestly, I kind of felt sorry for the guy. As she tried to reassure him and convince him to move on, he became a bit confrontational. Eventually, he made a veiled threat about telling me everything. She calmly told him that I already knew it all and that she had come clean. Then she quickly ended the call and blocked him again. The following week, while Emily was at work, there was a knock at the door. It was Matt. I stepped outside to talk to him. I wasn't worried about a physical confrontation. I've got a good 3 inches and 40 pounds on him. He started showing me evidence of the affair, looking a little manic. I told him to stop. I tried to be empathetic, but truthfully, I didn't care much about how upset he was. I told him I'd known about the affair from the beginning and that he didn't need to show me anything. I had figured it out when it started and didn't say anything or stop her because, frankly, I didn't care. He stood there, dumbfounded, then turned and left. When I told Emily what had happened, she spiraled into a bit of a doom loop. That's kind of been the pattern these last few weeks, and honestly, it's starting to wear me out. She bought a couple of recovering from infidelity books, and we've been reading them together, mainly because she thinks it's important. But here's the thing. It's all backward. I'm supposed to be the betrayed partner, and she's the wayward one. Yet I'm constantly the one trying to reassure her. She has these emotional crashes and triggers, and I'm always on edge, trying to anticipate them. She wants to talk, check in on me, and make sure I'm okay, but I've already processed all of this. It's old news to me. I just want to get back to our routine. I've missed the last 3 D&D nights, and I even skipped the fights last weekend, which had been planned for 2 months. I'm trying to be a good partner, but the irony isn't lost on me. I'm thinking about setting some hard boundaries around affair talk. I've also been pushing her to come clean to her sister, Cam. Emily and Cam have always been close, and I need someone else to help shoulder the load of keeping Emily together. In the long run, I think we'll be fine. I just needed to vent during this rough patch. It's been a long year, and for the most part, it's been a good year. Up until recently, the first few months post-affair were tough. After everything came out, Emily had a really hard time coming to terms with her own infidelity. Meanwhile, I had already processed it and was ready to move on, like I mentioned in my last post. I set a rule that we could only talk about the affair 5 times a week. Once she hit that limit, she had to wait until Monday for her week to reset. On top of that, I told her I wasn't going to miss any more D&D nights. She agreed, but was worried about what she would do on Wednesdays since I usually don't get home until midnight or 1 a.m. I suggested she tell Cam everything. Surprisingly, she listened to me. Cam was mad and disappointed at first, but after the initial shock wore off, she became someone Emily could lean on. After that, there were still triggers and setbacks, but things became much more manageable. We got back to our normal routine and everything was going smoothly. Emily even joined an in-person yoga class on Wednesdays, which was a nice change since she usually did yoga videos at home. But then, last week, we got served. Matt is suing both of us on the grounds of emotional distress and lost wages. He's claiming that Emily led him on for 2 years, manipulating him into believing they would build a life together. He's also seeking damages for lost wages. According to his complaint, he passed up a job offer from another company that would have paid him more, as well as a promotion at his current job that would have relocated him to another city. He says he stayed in his current situation under the impression that Emily was going to divorce me and start a life with him. Emily was ready to contact Matt and confront him, but I told her that wasn't an option. We needed to get a lawyer immediately. We ended up hiring Reed Bomer out of Milwaukee, who specializes in civil cases. At our consultation, he told us not to worry too much. There's no way a judge won't throw this out. He explained that around 6 states have laws about alienation of affection, which allow a betrayed spouse to sue the affair partner. Wisconsin isn't one of those states, but even in the states where this law exists, these cases are rare and rarely go anywhere. That said, there have been a few significant ones. Reed told us, "What we have here is the opposite of that. This guy has some nerve. To claim that he's the victim when he knowingly pursued a relationship with a married woman, he's not going to get any sympathy from a judge. I'm surprised he even found someone to represent him." He said he'd file a response to the complaint this week and would follow that up with a motion to dismiss the case. The consultation with our lawyer really helped calm me down a bit. Reed made it seem like this would be over before it even really started, which was a huge relief. But I'm still on edge. I don't want this mess getting out. It's one thing for Cam to know, but that's as far as I want it to go. I really just want to find Matt and beat the crap out of him. I won't, but the desire is there. Emily, on the other hand, has been an emotional wreck since we got served. Even after meeting with Reed, she hasn't seemed to calm down. After a year of getting our lives back on track, this is the last thing we need. Hopefully things will play out just like Reed says, and the case will be dismissed soon. But then the Milwaukee County case of Matt Mitchell v. Emily Parker and Jacob Parker continued on. Fuck me. The case wasn't dismissed in the pleadings phase, and I couldn't believe it when Reed told us. I asked how this was even possible. Here's a guy who basically played the role of a male homewrecker, and he's suing me, and it wasn't thrown out? What kind of world is this where he's the victim? Reed explained that the judge might be holding onto the case because it's so unprecedented. Precedents are everything in the legal world, and when something new comes up, it's a big deal for judges and lawyers. Reed said he had been researching since we brought him the case and couldn't find anything like it. If it has been brought to other judges before, they must have thrown it out, but that doesn't set an official precedent. He explained that the case could have been dismissed for any number of reasons, improperly filed paperwork, or some technicality. But this one was solid. This is the kind of case law schools will study when they discuss frivolous lawsuits, he told me. I'm trying hard not to take my frustration out on Emily. I understand why the affair started, and I made peace with it a long time ago, but this lawsuit has me on edge. I don't want to be publicly known for this. If word gets out, I have no idea what I'll do. We've entered the discovery phase of the case now, and I'm kicking myself for not going through Emily's messages with Matt sooner. I probably should have checked them after the affair came to light. Turns out there were countless exchanges of "I love you" between them. It was mostly him saying it, but Emily sent it a few times as well. There were also plenty of conversations where he directly asked her when she was going to leave me, and she always responded with something vague like "soon." She fed him all the classic excuses, saying the timing wasn't right or she needed to save up more money first. All the cliches cheaters use when they have no intention of leaving their spouse. It was like bad dialogue out of an old rom drama. I asked her if she meant any of it, and she said no, not a single word. After we started working on our marriage, I never thought about leaving you. I just told him what he wanted to hear. I pressed further. Really? How could you say all that? She replied, he was just my drug of choice, and I wasn't ready to quit yet. I quickly told her, if they ask you in court, do not repeat that sentence. I believe her. I think she was just addicted to the attention and didn't want to give it up. But this lawsuit has put us in a seriously bad spot. Emily is now on administrative leave while they conduct an investigation. Her boss got subpoenaed for a deposition as he's one of the higher-ups in the company, and Matt is claiming that Emily used her position as his secretary to sabotage his career. It's an absolute disaster. On top of that, I'm being accused of being complicit in her actions, of helping her undermine Matt's career and damage his mental health. He's even using the fact that I knew about the affair the whole time as evidence that I encouraged her to lead him on and waste years of his life. To make matters worse, the fucker recorded both her closure call and our conversation outside my house. Now I'm constantly checking local news websites, paranoid that the media will pick up on this case. The last thing I want is for everyone I know to find out about the affair or the fact that I knew all along. I'm not sure how much longer I can live like this. I'm trying to be strong for Emily because I know she's taking this hard. She rightfully blames herself for the whole situation, but I still love her and hate seeing her in so much pain. I'm holding out hope that we can settle this before it ever reaches the courtroom. Well, it's all over now, and the damage is done. We pushed for a settlement, desperate to make the whole mess disappear without going to court. But Matt asked for an absurd amount of money and refused to budge. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't in this for the money. He wanted revenge and to embarrass us. There was no way any sane judge would ever rule in favor of the other man. I was right about how the case would play out. The court proceedings were relatively short, all things considered. Matt's lawyer tried to paint Emily as some sort of manipulative dominatrix, like she was keeping him trapped in some twisted power play. They even suggested she was purposely preventing him from advancing in his career, despite having no actual evidence. The fact that he turned down a promotion on his own didn't seem to matter to them. Reed easily dismantled their argument. It was clear from their early messages that Matt had pursued Emily, and she had made it known from the start that she was married. While she did go along with the affair, the judge saw right through their case. We won and Matt walked away with nothing. I guess the judge got to set a new precedent with this one. But even though Matt lost the legal battle, it feels like he won the war. In the weeks leading up to the case, the details leaked to the media. It started locally but quickly gained national attention. The case was so ridiculous that, of course, it became headline news. I've read every article about it from almost every outlet. The comments are brutal. Most people have latched onto the nickname the Cuck of Oak Creek. It's humiliating. I can deal with the affair. I can still love my wife. But being known by that nickname? That's too much. I haven't left the house in weeks. I've stopped going to D&D on Wednesdays. Friends have reached out offering support, but I can't bring myself to answer the phone. I'll reply to text, but I have no desire to socialize. My family knows now too. My dad has no sympathy for me, constantly giving me unsolicited advice. I blocked him after the 5th time he told me I should have divorced Emily the moment she texted another guy. What good is that advice now? I don't have a damn time machine. Emily had to resign from her job. They would have fired her if she hadn't. We didn't need her income, but I know it hurt her to leave. She liked that job. Matt had left soon after their affair ended, so that wasn't a factor anymore, but she's still devastated. I'm too drained to comfort her this time. I'm hurting too much myself. After we passed the pleadings phase of the case, there was a noticeable rift between us. She tried to make up for it, but she was an emotional mess. Worse than after the affair ended. I just couldn't be her rock this time. Our intimacy took a nosedive, with both of us struggling under the weight of our internal conflicts. We ended up having some heated arguments. During one fight, she even implied that the affair was my fault. She quickly tried to backtrack, saying it out of anxiety, but the damage was done. It stung. I know I wasn't the best husband back then, but to imply it was my fault, that was crossing a line. We both thought that after the case ended and the media frenzy died down, we'd recover. But that hasn't been the case. If anything, our home is now filled with this cold, awkward tension. I can't forgive her, and I know it stems from my own humiliation. I didn't ask for any of this. She chose to cheat, and if she had just owned up to it and left me instead of trying to have her cake and eat it too, at least I'd still have my dignity. I've accepted a new job in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm moving. My employer will probably be relieved. Ever since my identity got out, our social media pages have been flooded with trolls, making jokes at my expense. I also had Emily served with divorce papers. It turns out our marriage was strong enough to survive infidelity, but not this. She's been begging me to reconsider. I was willing to hear her out until she suggested we stay in Oak Creek. I can't. I need to leave Milwaukee, leave Wisconsin altogether. I'll go be the only Bucks fan in Connecticut. I'm giving her the house. I don't want it. She can sell it, and we'll call that her alimony. I'm sure she'll land on her feet when she's ready. She's been staying with her mom and sister since I served her. I feel terrible about how everything turned out, but I know I can't go back, and I definitely can't stay here. I start my new job in 2 weeks. I've already lined up an apartment and will head out a week early. I hate that it had to end like this, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that if I ever get even the slightest chance to screw over Matt Mitchell, I'll take it. I'll go out of my way to make sure of it. He's made an enemy for life, and I will never forget or forgive what he did. Now on to the next story. I lived a dream life with my girlfriend, and now she asks to break up without reason. My girlfriend Kelly, 21, Beth, has been acting kind of off lately, and now she's asking for a break. I didn't handle it well, and I could really use some advice on what to do next. Let me give you the long version. I'm Jason, 20M, and I met Kelly while I was at a soccer tournament in another country. I was just 13 back then, and honestly, girls were the last thing on my mind at the time. I was playing 2 sports, getting ready to start high school. Yeah, I graduated at 16, and just focused on the game. Her younger brother was also in the tournament, which is how we crossed paths. I still remember how we met like it was yesterday. I was walking down the hallway of the hotel, heading toward the lobby, when I spotted two stunning girls coming my way. To my right, there was this tall, curvy girl with sandy blonde hair, exuding serious confidence. And on my left was this adorable girl with bleach blonde curly hair, big green eyes, and these fairy-like features. To my surprise, they stopped in front of me, and the cute one, Kelly, said, "Hey, Jason, how are you feeling?" I must have looked so confused because she just smiled at me, holding out her drink, and asked if I wanted a sip. I thanked her but told her I was just going to the lobby to grab a soda. Without missing a beat, both girls said, "Great, we'll come with you." Now, I was super shy back then and had no clue how to act around girls. All I could muster was a quiet "sure," and we started walking. They flanked me, one on each side, chatting across me like I wasn't even there. Kelly explained to her friend how she knew me through her brother. I vaguely remembered playing on the same team as her brother a few years earlier before I got moved up to an older age group. When we finally got to the lobby, it hit me what was happening. The place was packed with players from the tournament, and I could feel eyes on me. It seemed like everyone was staring, watching this tall, skinny kid walk in with two beautiful blondes by his side. It was surreal, but it gave me a serious boost of confidence. I headed to the hotel shop to grab my soda, and Kelly's friend Megan spotted someone she knew. She gave me a quick, "Nice to meet you, Jason," and walked off, leaving me alone with Kelly. Kelly stuck close by as I made my purchase, and then she asked if we could sit on one of the lobby couches to finish our drinks. I agreed, and we spent the next couple of hours talking. We flirted a bit, well, as much as you can at 13, and talked about everything from family to friends. Eventually, I walked her to her room where she was staying with her parents and brother before heading back to mine. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink because I couldn't stop thinking about her. After the tournament, I called her the day I got home with a little push from my mom, and we officially started dating a few weeks later. It's been 7 years since. From where I'm standing, our relationship has been perfect. We've supported each other through everything. Kelly was my first everything, and I was hers. She was a figure skater, and when she wrecked her knee so badly she needed surgery, I was right there by her side. She never had any illusions of going pro, but it still devastated her. I, on the other hand, was chasing a dream. I ended up playing semi-pro hockey, but never made it to the big leagues. For 3 years, we made our long-distance relationship work, while she went to school and earned her nursing certificate, and I pursued hockey. Eventually, I came back, started university, and my scholarships covered everything. I thought we had it all. She was working, I was focused on school, and we spent every other moment together, already talking about our future. And then, last weekend happened. We decided to go to a football game at my university with a couple of my high school friends, Ryan and Derek. We weren't super close, but we had kept in touch over the years. Before the game, we met up for drinks, reminisced about old times, and had some good laughs. During the game, we had a few hidden drinks, and that's when I noticed Kelly getting pretty tipsy. She seemed super into whatever Ryan was saying, and was also keeping Derek's attention. I tried to join the conversation a few times, but it was like she either couldn't hear me over the crowd or just wasn't interested. After the game, things really started to feel off. Kelly started walking with me, but quickly sped up to walk and chat with Ryan. Then Derek joined in on the other side, leaving me trailing behind while they laughed and teased each other like I wasn't even there. When we got to Derek's car, he was the designated driver. Kelly and Ryan got in the back seat together. Now, I'm a big guy, 6'5" and 220 pounds, so I usually get the front seat by default. That wasn't the issue, but what bothered me was how Kelly and Ryan kept joking around in the back, with her egging him on as he mooning people from the window. They were in their own little world, laughing and goofing off, completely leaving me out of the conversation. To say I was pissed would be an understatement. We dropped Ryan off first, and he kept goofing around in the back seat until I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Get out, I'd like to get home tonight." Kelly shot me a sharp glance at that point. Next, we dropped Kelly off. I walked her drunk self to her parents' front door, gave her a half-hearted kiss, and told her to drink some water and I'd call her tomorrow. On the way to my place, I looked at Derek and asked if everything seemed weird to him. He shrugged it off and said, "Nah, Kelly's always been friendly, plus she clearly had too much to drink." Then he added, "She only has eyes for you, dude." When I got home, I downed a liter of water and passed out. The next morning, I woke up, texted Kelly, "Good morning, beautiful," went on my usual morning run, and then headed to school. She texted me around 10 a.m. saying, "Good morning, I'm so hungover and my shift starts in an hour. I'll call you around 8 tonight after I get home." I finished my classes at 3 p.m., stuck around the university until 6, catching up on readings and organizing notes. I decided to grab her favorite fast food on my way to her parents' place since I knew we were about to have a serious conversation. This wasn't the first time I had to talk to her about being overly flirty when she drank. Back in high school, we'd had a couple of similar conversations. She had always owned up to her behavior, apologized, cried, and reassured me she loved me and would never hurt me. I was expecting the same this time, but things didn't go as I thought they would. She pulled up to her parents' house around 7:45 p.m., and I was waiting for her on the porch. I was a little surprised to see her still on her phone when she parked. She didn't even notice me until I stood up and the porch light turned on. She glanced at me before looking back at her dashboard, saying goodbye to whoever was on the phone. I held up the bag of food and said, "Thought you might be hungry and we could eat while we talk." She walked up, hugged me, looked into my eyes, and in a raspy voice simply said, "I know." She took my hand and led me to the porch, and right then, I knew in my gut, this wasn't going to be our usual talk. As soon as we sat down, I went straight for it. "What was up with you last night?" She looked at me with a sad expression and said, "I know, I got caught up in old high school memories, I was just reminiscing about hanging out with those guys, smoking pot and playing drinking games." Then she added with a small smile, "I kinda miss those days when all we had to think about was having fun." I shot back sarcastically, "Yeah, well, it looked like you were having a great time with Ryan last night." She buried her face in her hands and whispered, "Sorry." I leaned in closer, trying to catch her eye, and said, "What was that? I didn't quite hear you." And then she snapped. She stood up screaming, "I said, I'm sorry, Jason. Did you hear that?" I wasn't ready for that. She had never yelled at me before, and I just sat there, stunned. As she stood there, shaking, she said the words I wasn't prepared for. "I think we need to take a break." I just stared up at her, struggling to process what she was saying. Then she started talking again, but I couldn't hear a word. It was like my brain shut off, and all I could hear was this loud ringing in my ears. By the time the ringing stopped, she was already crying, and to be honest, so was I. Somehow I managed to ask, "So, are we done?" She put her hands on my face, and the warmth felt like a wave of comfort. She rested her forehead against mine, and her familiar scent surrounded me. In a soft voice, she said, "I hope not. I just need to know what life is like without you. We've been together for 7 years, and I don't know what I want in a relationship. All I know is what we do and what we've done. Don't you ever wonder if you want something different?" That hit me like a punch in the gut. I stood up, towering over her, and snapped, "So you want to date other people but don't think we're done?" She collapsed into her chair, curling into a ball, and all I wanted to do was reach out and hold her, but I stopped myself. She just kept sobbing, "No, no, no, no." Then she blurted out, "Do you realize that we haven't gone a single day in the past 7 years without talking?" I shot back, "Why wouldn't we talk?" She replied quietly, "I need to figure out who I am, Jason." She continued, "I'm asking for space. I need 3 months of no contact, 3 months to make my own decisions without asking your thoughts or opinions. I know this is going to hurt us both, but I love you so much that I think we'll be stronger if we know who we are as individuals. Let's take a break until December 15th. After that, we can start planning to move in together next year." I stared at her, watching her tremble in her little ball, and said, "Your plan only works if we stay loyal to each other." She looked up at me, confused, and said, "I don't understand." "Have you ever felt like I don't listen to you?" I asked. "No," she answered. "Have we ever made decisions about us without talking them over first?" She shook her head. "No, we talk about everything, Jason." I softened my gaze and said, "I know I'm demanding, and I expect a lot from myself and you. But you're the most important person in my life. You've taught me empathy, and you've shown me that life isn't just a straight path. We've gone through so much together, and I can't imagine who I'd be without you. My point is, if we can make choices over the next 3 months with each other in mind, maybe this will help, but we have to stay loyal to each other even during the no contact. Does that make sense?" and that's when she tore my heart out. She looked at me and said, "I'm not sure that thinking about you during this time will help, Jason. You'll always be in my heart, but I need to make my choices without considering you." That's when I got up and walked away, muttering, "I hope you're still my love on December 15th. I could hear her crying as I got into my car and drove off. So, here I am, a complete wreck, asking one simple question. What should I do? I posted 3 days ago about my girlfriend of 7 years demanding a 3-month period of no contact so we could take a break from each other. I want to thank everyone who took the time to read and respond to my post. I know it was long, but writing it all out helped me focus on the journey we've been through so far. After rereading the conversation multiple times, I've come to a conclusion that I disagree with most of the responses I received. I don't believe Kelly has someone else in her heart or mind. I really hope I don't end up doing one of those Reddit "you were right" posts, but here's what I'm thinking. First of all, I can't see how she would have had time for anyone else in the past year and a half. We've been practically inseparable. Second, my gut has never let me down when it comes to her. It might sound strange, especially since I'm a pretty logical person, but I can't deny it. The best example I can give is from when I left to play hockey. We'd talk on the phone every night, and she was always upbeat, giving me pep talks and making me laugh. But after a couple of weeks, I started getting these intense stomach cramps after our calls. At first, I thought it was just stress. But then my friends started texting me, saying Kelly wasn't herself at school. She wasn't sticking around to chat with anyone, and they described her as looking like a zombie. I called her mom, and sure enough, Kelly was struggling with separation anxiety or something like that. Her mom thanked me for letting her know, and just like that, my gut feeling disappeared. Long story short, my gut has always been right, and right now, it's not my gut that's acting up, it's my heart, and it's shattered. Fuck my life. Now for the update and the reason I'm posting again. I spent all of Sunday in a panic. I texted Kelly at least 100 times and tried calling her at least 20 more. I even tried sending her an email, but it bounced back. I'm clearly blocked on everything, and it hurts more than I can explain. I really don't understand the point of what's happening. I get the whole no contact thing when people break up, but why is she doing this on a break? When I replay our conversation in my head, it's her saying she needs to find herself that sticks out the most. She wants to be sure she's making her own choices and not just going along with what I want. Honestly, I kinda get that. I've been on sports teams my whole life, and it's easy to just sit back and let the group decide everything. If you never speak up, you never have to worry about causing conflict or rocking the boat. But eventually, you start to feel like you're not even participating anymore. That's when resentment creeps in, and you become uninterested. Neither of those things is good for a team or a relationship. That said, I don't for a second believe Kelly has become resentful or lost interest in our relationship. I'm honestly skeptical that she even feels unheard in any way. I'm just completely baffled by what's happening. What's the purpose of no contact? Why can't I send her a couple of texts a day? I don't see why I can't just remind her she's always in my heart and on my mind. If anyone has insight into this, I really appreciate it. Monday was rough. I skipped school. I couldn't get out of bed. My whole body felt sick, and I couldn't stop shaking. I have 2 younger brothers, and they both approached me after they got home from school. Apparently, Kelly has a Facebook account that they follow. They noticed how messed up I was and saw some strange memes on her page, so they messaged her, asking if she was okay. She replied that she was fine but told them to check on me. She also said she loved them but wouldn't be available to chat for a while. That was the first time my brothers had ever seen me break down in front of them. Now it's Tuesday morning, and I'm starting to feel a bit more functional. I'm going to try to power through my classes today, but it's pretty obvious that word is getting around. I've been getting a steady stream of texts from friends, family, and acquaintances. Most of them are asking how I'm doing, which feels like pity, suggesting we grab a beer or a bite to eat, which feels like they're just looking for gossip, or flat out asking if Kelly and I broke up. I'm not ready to deal with all of this right now. I need a few days before I respond to anyone. So, here I am, still trying to figure this out. If a break isn't about dating other people or finding yourself, then what is it about? I've had a fleeting thought that maybe it's about learning to love yourself before you can love someone else. Is that even a possibility? Any thoughts or advice would really help right now. I mentioned on Tuesday that word about my relationship was spreading fast. It's crazy how quickly people learn your business these days. I couldn't deal with the constant questions, so I turned my phone off and left it by my bed. Honestly, it felt pointless to keep it on since its main purpose, talking to Kelly, was gone. Yeah, sad thoughts suck. Wednesday morning was better. I actually managed to sleep and I had enough energy to do some push-ups and squats before heading to school. I didn't hang around after class and was back home by 3. No sooner had I gotten home than 3 of my friends showed up. I offered them coffee, but instead they grabbed me and dragged me out of the house. One of them grabbed my golf clubs that were sitting by the side of the house, and off we went. Clearly my family and friends were working together on this. I had to laugh. There's a group of 6 of us who've been playing hockey together since we were 10. We traveled together, ate together, worked out together, and were basically inseparable for 10 months out of every year. They're like brothers to me. Even when a few of us were chasing our dreams in different cities, we stayed in touch. The 3 who picked me up were Aaron, Alex, and Andy. Yep, all our names start with A. The other 2, Warren and Trevor, live and work in other cities now. So, that's where I'm at. If anyone has insight into what this break is really about, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The guys gave me a hard time about not answering my phone, but I just told them the constant stream of stupid texts was getting overwhelming. They got it and let it slide. The rest of the afternoon and evening was filled with laughter, jokes, and some friendly competition on the golf course. I steered clear of alcohol. I've learned that it only makes a bad mood worse. The elephant in the room was never brought up, which was honestly a relief. After the round, we hit up the clubhouse and I finally had my first proper meal since Saturday. By the time they dropped me off around 10, I felt so much better. Everyone needs friends like that in their life. Thursday started on a good note. I went for my first run in a while and had a decent day at school, though I lost focus a bit by the end. When I got home, I made the mistake of scrolling through my phone. I wish I hadn't, but now here we are. I'd appreciate some advice on how to deal with these responses. I've already responded to the positive messages. Kelly's brother, Dan, reached out, thanking me for being a big part of their family for the last 7 years. He's a smart guy, studying at an Ivy League school out east, and he expressed hope that Kelly and I would work through whatever is going on. His message really meant a lot. My oldest friend, William, also sent a nice message about moving forward. He's currently on tour with his band, but will be back in town next month, and I'm looking forward to catching up with him. Then there were a bunch of well-wishers, and I replied with a simple thanks. But this is where things get weird, and I could use some help. It feels like some people only remembered I exist because they heard I was going through a rough time. I've got a Facebook and Instagram account, though I rarely use either. Kelly and I set them up in high school, connected with friends, and then realized social media wasn't really our thing. I didn't even know she still used hers until my brothers showed me earlier this week. I checked, and sure enough, Kelly had blocked me. But the messages I've been receiving have really thrown me for a loop. One batch was some variation of, "Hey, heard you're single, hit me up if you're interested." Then there was another group. "Hey, I heard you and Kelly broke up. Mind if I reach out to her?" At least these people had the decency to ask, but still, geez. The rest were more like, "How's it going? Are you and Kelly still together?" Or, "What happened? It's only been 5 days. Effin' vultures." Thankfully, I also received messages from extended family and former teammates just checking in and offering support, so it wasn't all bad. But here's where I'm stuck. Clearly, my wider circle of contacts is talking, making assumptions, and seems way too interested in what's happening between Kelly and me. I can either stay silent and let the rumors swirl, or I can put out a message to try and calm things down. The problem is, anything I come up with sounds, well, kinda weak. Like, what am I supposed to say? Kelly and I are taking a break to figure things out? What does that even mean? And I'm pretty sure something like that would only stir the pot even more. If anyone has advice on how to handle this, I'd really appreciate it. Now on to the next story. I really messed up during my bachelor party trip. My fiancée moved on, and now all I want is to win her back. 5 years ago, Adam 28, made a choice that completely wrecked my life. At the time, I had everything going for me. I was the new guy at my firm, working as an architect, mostly designing subdivisions, and I was really enjoying it. I had been with my girlfriend Sarah, 29F now, 24 then, for 3 years, and we had recently gotten engaged. I thought nothing could go wrong. After Sarah said yes, we started planning the wedding. Neither of us wanted a big traditional wedding, so we decided to elope to a coastal city, San Diego to be exact. Parents and siblings were welcome to join if they wanted, but it was basically just going to be our honeymoon with a wedding ceremony included. Since the trip was going to be relatively inexpensive, we agreed to splurge a bit on some pre-wedding activities. Instead of traditional bachelor and bachelorette parties, we decided to cross some things off our bucket lists. Sarah wanted to swim with sharks, so she and her best friend Maggie booked a cage diving trip to Florida for a long weekend. My dream was a bit different. I had always wanted to visit Thailand. It was something I'd been fascinated with since I was 10 years old and had sworn I'd go one day. Sarah actually encouraged me to go, reminding me that I had even mentioned Thailand on our first date. 6 months into our engagement, it was finally time for me and my best friend Tyler to head off on the trip. The first 3 days were fantastic. We enjoyed the beaches, visited temples, and did a lot of drinking. But on the third night, Tyler got absolutely wasted. I was annoyed because we had a jungle excursion planned for the next day, something I had been really looking forward to. I had paced myself avoiding heavy drinking so I could enjoy it. The next morning, Tyler was nursing a massive hangover and refused to get out of bed. He suggested we reschedule the excursion for the next day, but I wasn't having it. I decided to go on my own. I went out to grab breakfast and saw a guy on the side of the road offering jungle excursions for cheap. He had a Jeep, and when he saw me checking out his sign, he gave me the hard sell. It seemed a bit sketchy, but he spoke English really well, which made me feel comfortable. So I went with him. At first, the trip was great. We went off-road through the jungle, and I had no idea where we were going, but I was enjoying it. Then things took a turn for the worse. We pulled into a small clearing, and I was looking around when suddenly local law enforcement showed up. I couldn't understand most of what they were saying, just picking up a word here and there. They searched the guy's Jeep and found a large stash of meth. I was panicking. They took both of us to a small station in the middle of nowhere. That's when I realized this guy had taken me across the border into Cambodia. Worse, I didn't have my ID or passport on me. They were back in the hotel room. The cops wouldn't listen to anything I said, and I had no idea what my guide was telling them. I was terrified, but tried to reassure myself that Tyler would realize I was missing and look into where I might be. I won't go into all the details of what the next 4.5 years were like, but it was a living hell. A Cambodian jail is far from a hospitable place. It took 5 months before I even saw a judge. The judicial system was incredibly backlogged, and public defenders were scarce and only available in the big cities. Throughout all this time, I wasn't allowed to contact anyone back home. My first time in front of a judge, there was no interpreter, and the trial got postponed for another 5 months. After finally entering a plea, it was another 14 months before I had my actual hearing. The judge was fair and dismissed my charges on time served, but the prosecutor appealed the dismissal, which put me back in custody for another 28 months. That was the most crushing moment of my life. I thought I was about to be free, only to be thrown back in for over 2 more years. During this time, I came to the realization that everyone back home thought I was dead. I had gone missing, and Tyler had no clue where I was. The last time I had called back was on the morning I got arrested, and I had only left vague messages about going on a jungle excursion. My parents, my fiancée, they had no idea what had happened to me. I missed them more than words can describe. There were days when I just wished one of the other inmates or a brutal guard would end it for me, especially after the first year when I'd grown more tolerant of the terrible food and water. Finally, after 52 months in captivity, I was released. I had nothing to my name and found myself in a country I wasn't supposed to be in. I contacted the embassy, and they did have a missing persons file for me. They helped me get in touch with home. I tried calling my fiancé, but a guy named Mitch answered and said he didn't know anyone named Sarah, so I figured she must have changed her number. That's when I called my mother. She was frantic when she heard my voice. My dad joined the call, and I told them everything that had happened. I kept asking about Sarah, but my mom kept avoiding the topic. She wanted to focus on getting me home. saying we would talk about everything once I got back to the US. The process took some time, but luckily my parents still had my original passport and ID, which sped things up a bit. In the meantime, they sent me money so I could get a hotel. Throughout this period, my parents were adamant that I shouldn't try to contact Sarah until I got home. I started to assume that Sarah had moved on and was with someone else. It broke my heart, but based on how my parents were acting, it seemed like a reality I had to accept. Even though I suspected she had moved on, I still wanted to talk to her more than anything else. I didn't care about discussing my time in Cambodia or hearing about what everyone had done to try and find me. I just wanted my fiancé back. When I finally got home, my parents sat me down and handed me a save-the-date card. It was Sarah and some tall, handsome guy I had never seen before. She was engaged. I broke down. It wasn't unexpected, but the pain was still overwhelming. I asked my parents if they had kept in touch with Sarah beyond being invited to the wedding, and they said yes. They'd actually been a huge part of her life over the past few years. I was a little shocked. I knew they liked Sarah, but I figured with me gone, they would have drifted apart, not grown closer. I asked, "So how close are you now?" My mom responded, "Very close. Her father passed away about a year ago, and your dad has agreed to walk her down the aisle." That stung. It shouldn't have, but it did. All I could say was, "Why you?" My mom started to get emotional, explaining how they all thought I was gone, how they searched for so long, and how they believed I'd been taken by a cartel or worse. They even held a memorial service for me. I snapped, "I don't care about that right now. What are you not telling me?" That's when my mother grabbed the tablet and flipped through a few photos. She handed it back to me, and there was a group picture. My parents, Sarah, her fiancé, her mom, my sister, my brother, Tyler, and some other friends, along with a few kids. In the center of the table was a boy sitting behind a birthday cake. The decorations read, "Happy 4th birthday." He was smiling, full of joy. I looked at my parents in disbelief. My mom looked at me and said, "That's your son, Jason Paul," my dad's name, Adam Ryan, our last name. In the 2 weeks since I've been back, it feels like so much has happened, yet nothing has changed. I've been brought up to speed on everything that happened while I was gone. After Tyler finally got up that day, he tried calling me, but my phone had been confiscated by the police upon my arrest, and I never saw it again. Thinking I was just enjoying my jungle excursion, Tyler went about his day. By nightfall, he started to get concerned. He called home, asking if anyone had heard from me. The next morning, my family and Sarah were frantically calling Tyler, wondering if I had returned. That's when Tyler started going around to the excursion companies, but none of them had seen me. He panicked and alerted everyone back home. My parents, brother, and fiancé flew out to Thailand and spent a month canvassing the area, but they had to return home eventually. My parents even made another trip back later to search again, but there were no leads. For a year and a half, they kept pressing the Thai authorities about my disappearance, but no one thought to look in Cambodia. Meanwhile, Sarah found out she was pregnant. The day I left for Thailand, she was unknowingly about 10 weeks along. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her missing me while pregnant with my child. I wish I had never gone on that trip. My parents told me that Sarah leaned on them a lot, and they were more than happy to help. Over the years, they all became incredibly close. Sarah's parents were supportive, but they were older and not in great health, so my mom took Sarah to many of her OB appointments. My mom was even in the delivery room alongside Sarah's mom when Jason was born. He came early at 34 weeks, and it was stressful, but thankfully Jason showed no signs of health issues, though they kept him under observation for a while. My parents have told me they really needed this. The not knowing what happened to me was an unbearable weight on them, and the birth of their grandson gave them some much-needed relief from the grief. They keep apologizing, but honestly, they didn't do anything wrong. I guess it's just guilt now that they know I was out there and they feel like they failed to find me. Tyler has come by to see me. He's apologized more times than I can count. He's gotten married since the trip and now has 2 kids. He seems nervous around me, which I guess is understandable. I do hold some resentment toward him, even though it wasn't his fault. The feeling is just there anyway. My brother and sister have moved forward with their lives. My brother has kids now, and my sister is married. I missed all of that. I could probably find a way to get over everything else, but losing my fiance and missing out on 4 years with my son, it's just been too much. My parents set me up with a therapist. I went to the first session, but I honestly didn't know what to talk about. I mean, I was wrongfully imprisoned for 5 years, beaten at times, starved at times. I've got plenty of PTSD. My whole family thought I was dead, and they even held a memorial service for me 3 years to the day of my disappearance. I was supposed to marry the love of my life, and now she's engaged to someone else. On top of all that, I have a 4-year-old son who's been raised by my replacement since he was 18 months old. Jason only knows this guy as Dad. He calls him Dad. And here I am, back from the dead, throwing everyone's perfect lives into chaos. I'm ranting, but it's all just too much to process. I still haven't spoken directly to Sarah. The day after I returned, my dad went to her house. He sat down with her and her fiancé Brian, 34M, and told them that I had been found. At first, Sarah thought he meant they had found my body, and she started to cry. When he clarified, she broke down completely. Her fiancé comforted her, and according to my dad, she just sat there in silence after that. I tried texting her, but I didn't get a response for an entire day. Then I finally got a message back. "I'm so sorry, I just can't right now." I haven't asked anyone much about Brian, except to learn that they've been engaged for about 2 months, and the wedding is in 6 months. No one has volunteered any more details. We were supposed to meet at the park last weekend. My sudden reappearance has disrupted everyone's sense of normalcy, and I can tell things are tense. My mom usually watches Jason while Sarah and Brian are at work, and she used to watch him at our house. But ever since I got back, she's only been watching him at Sarah's place. Apparently, they're preparing him to meet me. He knows I'm his biological father. My pictures have always been around my parents' house, and Sarah has always kept a photo of me up in Jason's room. I'm not the guy in the picture anymore, but at least I still kind of look like him. He won't be blindsided. My parents and I got to the park first. When Sarah's car pulled up, only Brian and Jason got out. Sarah wasn't with them. Jason ran to my dad first and gave him a big hug. When he saw me, he retreated toward my mom and then over to Brian. He was nervous, and honestly, so was I. The other adults tried to get us to interact, but I told them to let it go and let Jason play. He perked up and ran off to the playground. Brian came over, stuck out his hand, and we shook. He said, "Sorry, Sarah couldn't come today. We were about to leave and she just broke down and said she wasn't ready." I just nodded and said, "I understand." I headed over to the playground to try and bond with Jason in some way. It turns out he's really into superheroes. He pretended to be Spider-Man, and I played Rhino, chasing him around the playground while he webbed me up. He laughed and smiled, and for a moment, I thought maybe this wouldn't be so hard. Then he called Brian Dad. I shouldn't have been surprised. Brian has been in Jason's life for 2.5 years, and he's about to marry Sarah. They all live together. Still, hearing him call someone else Dad felt like a knife in the heart. I started to tear up and excused myself, saying I needed to use the Gross Park bathroom. After a minute, when I came out, Brian was waiting for me. I saw my parents across the way, keeping an eye on Jason. I felt awkward. This was the last thing I wanted, a heart-to-heart with Brian. He was taller, more built than me, and living the life I was supposed to have. He just said, "Can we talk?" I sighed and said, "Yeah, man. What's on your mind?" Brian began. "Look, I'm sorry for everything that happened to you. It's a tough situation all around. I just wanted to talk because I'm really worried about Sarah and Jason, especially Sarah. She hasn't been herself lately, which I get. It took her a long time to get over you. I'm the first person she dated after your disappearance, and she cried the first time we kissed because it was different. I want you to have a relationship with your son. He's young and he's resilient. I grew up with 2 dads, so I know Jason will be fine, but I'm not sure how Sarah or you will handle it if things move too fast. From a selfish standpoint, I don't want anything disrupting our lives or our engagement. I love her and want what's best for her. I think it's important for both of you to take things slow and process everything before you meet face to face. I've made an appointment for her to see a counselor. I'd really appreciate it if you could respect that and not push her or reach out until she's had time to figure things out on her own." As I listened to him, I felt pissed. What a pretentious ass. But annoyingly, he made some good points. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. I ended up saying, "Yeah, man, I can do that," and walked off to join my parents and Jason. Brian went into the grimy park bathroom. When he came back, he said he and Jason were heading out. Jason gave everyone hugs, including me, which surprised me but also made me happy. Then he called me Rhino and ran back to Brian. As they walked away, I heard him ask, "Dad, can we get a cookie cake on the way home?" Oh, he's Dad, and I'm Rhino. This just sucks. Finally, Sarah and I met. We started by texting a bit, but the conversations felt impersonal and stayed surface level. The deepest we got was talking about Jason, and I briefly mentioned what Cambodian prison was like. Over the next 3 weeks, we texted maybe 5 times. Each time the conversation started to get heavy, one of us would end it. During that time, though, I spent more time with Jason. My mom began watching him at her house again, which gave us more chances to bond. One day, we even had some one-on-one time when we went out for ice cream. It's amazing how resilient kids are. He just goes with the flow of everything. He still calls me Rhino, but maybe I'll earn the dad title eventually. Then, one day last week, when Brian came by to pick Jason up, he asked to talk again. At first, I got pissed, thinking he was going to offer me some job. Instead, he explained that it wasn't an offer but more of a lead. His brother owns a construction company and is looking for an estimator. Brian told him that I used to be an architect, and his brother said he'd give me an interview if I was interested. Brian left his brother's card with me. I really want to hate him, but I have to admit he seems like a genuinely good guy. It pisses me off even more that I can't hate him. He's got this self-deprecating sense of humor that's pretty infectious, even in the short conversations we've had. But at the same time, all I can think is, fuck that guy. This past Friday, I texted Sarah and we agreed to meet for lunch the next day. I suggested we go to this Italian place that had been our spot, but she got upset and I thought she was going to cancel. Instead, we pivoted to Applebee's. Seeing her in person was indescribable. She was as beautiful as ever. The hello hug sent shivers down my spine, and I didn't want to let go. I probably lingered a little too long, but didn't want to make it weird. We exchanged small talk while ordering, but once that was done, the conversation took a serious turn for the first time since I came back, and it stayed that way for the next hour. She opened up about how hard it had been to cope with losing me. She was grieving while pregnant, and said there were days when she didn't even want to go on. Hearing her talk about it hurt like hell. She said she felt so alone in our apartment that she spent most nights staying with her parents or mine. She kept hoping that every time the phone rang it would be news about me. But then she started dreading those calls, fearing it would be someone saying they'd found my body. She talked about how amazing my parents had been to her and how they had all grown closer over the years. My sister-in-law was pregnant at the same time as Sarah, so they bonded over their shared experiences during their pregnancies. It was after Jason's first birthday that my parents, of all people, talked to Sarah about getting back out there. She admitted that she was mainly spending time with her parents, my parents, or my sister-in-law and brother. She even drifted away from her best friend. Sarah told me it was out of fear. She never wanted to be away from Jason, thinking that if I could disappear in an instant, then anyone could. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him too. But after my parents intervened, she realized she was living like a widow and not like a 25-year-old woman. So she started reconnecting with her friends and allowed others to watch Jason occasionally so she could go out. It was about 2 months into her attempt at living life again that she ran into Brian. They met at a Starbucks. She was fumbling with her phone while holding Jason when this tall, handsome guy, my words, came up and scanned his phone, buying her coffee and a muffin. They struck up a conversation while waiting for their orders. When her order was called, he grabbed it, handed it to her, and gave her his business card with his number on it. Brian owns a screen printing shop. He said, "No pressure, but I'd love to get to know you better." Then they parted ways. She called him the next day. 4 months later, she introduced Jason to him. And a year after that, they moved in together. A few months ago, they got engaged. This is when I said my piece. I told her that I still loved her and that it was impossibly hard to see her with someone else. The thought of getting back to her was one of the few things that kept me going while I was locked away. She started to cry, and I reached out and took her hand. I asked if she was sure, or if there was any way we could try again. In hindsight, I know it was a selfish move, but at the time, I needed to know. She shook her head, looked up at me, and said, "I love you." I never stopped. "But I love Brian too, and I'm marrying him. It's not fair." "I know it's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong, but I had to move on. I spent years thinking you had died. When you came back, I was happy, but I also felt guilty." I cut her off. "You have nothing to feel guilty about. I screwed up and it cost me everything. I always knew you had probably moved on, and I don't blame you for that. I was gone, and there was no reason for you to think I'd ever come back. But I did dream of returning and finding you waiting for me. I know now that was unrealistic. I'm sorry for putting you in this position." She nodded and said, "It's okay. I knew this conversation was coming eventually." We just stopped talking after that, sitting there in silence, drinking our coffee. After what felt like an eternity, she finally asked, "How do you want to move forward when it comes to Jason?" I told her, "I love him already and want to be in his life." She smiled and said, "I'm so happy to hear that. I always told him about you. I never wanted him to think you abandoned him." I responded, "He's the one bright spot in all of this." She then told me that Brian had planned to adopt Jason once they were married, but those plans were off the table now that I had returned. I'm listed as Jason's father on his birth certificate, though I plan to meet with a lawyer just to make sure everything is in order legally. We made plans to meet with Jason later that week and spend time together as a family. She also encouraged me to continue having one-on-one time with him. We hugged one last time before parting ways. When I got back to my parents' house, I broke down. The finality of it all hit me hard. But after I recovered, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wallow in my grief anymore. I needed to swallow my pride and start rebuilding my life. The next day, I called Brian's brother and did an interview that same day. He hired me. That was the first step toward moving on. Now brace yourself, because you won't believe what's happened in the past 6 months. It's been absolutely crazy, but in a good way. After that first face-to-face meeting with Sarah, I decided to get my life back on track. I got hired as an estimator for Brian's brother, Mike, 36M, who owns a construction company. About 2 months into the job, Mike, knowing I was an architect, started asking me to design some of his custom homes to compare them with his usual architect's work. He liked my designs better. While I still work as an estimator, I'm now solely responsible for designing the custom homes for Mike. And he gave me a huge raise. That allowed me to move out of my parents' house and get my own apartment. Sarah and Brian's wedding plans moved forward, with only one major change. My father was no longer walking her down the aisle. Everyone agreed that given my return, it would have been inappropriate. Instead, her much older brother is going to take that role. Sarah was an oops baby, so her brother is 16 years older than she is. After that first lunch, I started seeing Sarah a lot more often. We made a point to get together with Jason at least once a week, doing something fun as a family. Brian was there too, but they kept their couple-like behavior to a minimum, which made things easier for me. I have to admit, I really enjoyed being around Sarah again and talking to her. It felt like we were falling back into the same kind of conversations we used to have when we first started dating. Then, as the back-to-school season hit, things shifted. Brian's screen printing business got swamped with orders. Fall sports, staff shirts, clubs, Greek life, all of it. He had contracts with all the school districts and local colleges, so he was swamped. That meant Sarah, Jason, and I started spending a lot more time together, just the three of us. As the months went by, Sarah and I got closer. Our greetings shifted from casual side hugs to lingering, full-on hugs. We'd talk for hours about everything, and it started to feel like the early days of our relationship all over again. Even when Brian started joining us again, Sarah and I continued rebuilding our friendship. And then, the most incredible thing happened. Jason started calling me Dad. I teared up the first 10 times he said it. It was overwhelming in the best way. Life carried on, and before I knew it, the wedding was just a week away. I wasn't planning to attend, but my parents were invited as guests. That weekend, they were throwing a semi-combined bachelor/bachelorette party. The plan was that each would go out to dinner with their friends, do their own thing, his was at Top Golf, and then they'd all meet up at a bar or club around 11 p.m. I wasn't part of any of this, and I had no idea where they planned to end up. But instead of staying in my apartment sulking, I decided to go out for the night. It was hard for me, knowing Sarah was about to marry someone else, even if that someone else was a good guy. No matter how much I tried, it still hurt. Around 10:30 that night, after a few drinks and with a good buzz going, I was about to call an Uber to head home when Sarah and her group of friends walked into the bar. At first, I stayed hidden in the crowd, not wanting to intrude on her night, but she spotted me almost immediately and came over to talk. Our conversation turned a little flirty, and when one of her favorite songs came on, she started dancing, and then dancing with me. We were laughing, having fun, and caught up in the moment. As the song ended, she stumbled into me, and I caught her. We were standing so close, and for a split second, our lips almost touched. But just as we were about to kiss, she pulled back. We both laughed it off awkwardly and headed to the bar for a drink. In hindsight, it was probably a good thing we didn't kiss, because a couple of minutes later, Brian walked up. He tried to be his usual friendly self, but something seemed a little off. They kissed, and suddenly I felt like the third wheel. I decided it was time to leave, so I ordered my Uber and went home. The next day, I was nursing a hangover and slept in late. It was a lazy Sunday, and around midday, I heard someone trying to open my front door. The door was locked, and then came the heavy knocking. I rushed over and opened it, and there stood Sarah. She lunged into my arms and kissed me, without hesitation. It was the sweetest feeling I'd ever experienced. Confusing, yes, but incredibly sweet nonetheless. I asked her what was going on, and she said, "Brian came to me this morning and started asking some tough questions. I don't want to get into it now. I promise I'll tell you everything one day, but I'm not ready yet. We decided to end things. I admitted that my feelings for you are still strong, and he said he understood. It hurt him, but he knew. He told me we both deserve to be happy, and he's stepping away. I called your parents, and they're fine with keeping Jason a little longer. I love you and want to be with you, and I'm guessing you feel the same way." I told her that's all I've ever wanted. It was a whirlwind from there. She had 2 bags packed for her and Jason, and they moved in with me that same day. The next day, my father went to visit Brian. He told me Brian looked a little hungover and had taken the day off work. They had a conversation, and my dad tried to be as empathetic as possible. He just wanted to check on him since Brian had been such a big part of their lives over the past few years. He asked Brian what his next steps were. Brian said, besides trying to get some deposits back, he had no idea. My dad offered to refund him the money and take over the reservations. He didn't ask why. My dad thinks Brian already knew. While that was happening, I had to go to work and face Mike. As soon as I arrived, he called me into his office. He had me sit down and started. "Let me say my piece. I'm angry. My brother tells me to let it go, and I will. I want to take that anger out on you, but I won't. My brother and I learned a tough lesson about revenge back in high school, and we swore we'd always be the bigger men. That said, I think it's best we part ways. My family needs time to heal, but I won't leave you hanging. You've got a week of paid time off. In that time, I want you to talk to an acquaintance of mine, Lee. He runs a construction company and is willing to hire you at your current salary. It's commercial, not residential, but you'll be fine." I stood up to thank him, but he cut me off. "This isn't for you, it's for Brian. Now go grab your things and head out." I contacted Lee that same day, and he said I could start in 2 weeks. When my father came back and told us he'd taken control of the wedding accommodations, Sarah and I just looked at each other and knew what we wanted. It wasn't the beach wedding we'd always dreamed of, but it was perfect in its own way. Ironically, it was Brian who had wanted the traditional wedding, but in the end, it turned out to be an amazing time. Jorge was my best man, and Sarah looked absolutely stunning in her dress. Finding a tux rental for me on such short notice was a bit of a headache, but it all worked out. We didn't have huge groups of friends or family, but it was wonderful to celebrate with the people who had supported us through the darkest times. It's been a month since the wedding, and I still can't quite believe it. Jason had some trouble adjusting. He misses Brian, but lately he seems happier. To think about where I was and where I am now, I can't help but feel incredibly lucky. Now on to the next story. My wife asked me for an open relationship, and after her first date, I was ready to walk out. Now she's suggesting we swing, so I'm not left out. I'm Logan, 27M, and I've been married to my wife Lauren 26F for 2 years. We've been together for 4 years, and I wouldn't say our relationship has been anything extraordinary. It's been solid, normal even. We met through a mutual friend, hit it off quickly, and after dating for about 18 months, we moved in together and got engaged. 6 months later, we had a small, simple wedding. For the first couple of years, things seemed fine. Great, even. We've both been focused on our careers and we're doing pretty well for ourselves. We still make time for dates and spending quality time together. Then, about 5 months ago, Lauren got promoted to a managerial role at a new company. A week later, she hit me with a request that completely blindsided me. She asked for an open relationship. I had no idea where this was coming from. We'd never discussed anything like that before. When I asked her why, she started talking about a married coworker, Olivia, who's in an open relationship. Apparently, Lauren and Olivia had been discussing this since Lauren's 3rd day on the job. Lauren began trying to sell me on the idea, bullet pointing how it would bring us closer, give us new experiences, spice up our sex life, and allow us to meet new people, and so on. Initially, I was completely against it. I still am, to be honest, but somehow here I am in this ridiculous situation. When I first turned her down, she seemed to accept it, and we just moved on with our night. But she didn't let it go. She kept bringing it up, again and again. On top of that, she started sending me stories from forums like r/non-monogamy and r/open marriage, but only the positive, cherry-picked ones. When I started looking at those forums myself and sent her some of the horror stories I found, she stopped sharing them. Instead, she said, we shouldn't be basing our marriage on someone else's experience. She also started acting like superwife, bringing home my favorite snacks, doing extra chores, and constantly initiating sex. While I enjoyed the attention, it felt a little hollow, knowing there was a motive behind it all. I kept asking her if there was someone she was already interested in. She denied it, swearing there wasn't anyone else, and even getting upset the last time I brought it up. But I'm not entirely convinced. I know her new job has a lot of guys her age, fresh out of college. I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it than what she's saying. Yet she continued to push this idea of new experiences and how it could bring us closer. And maybe she had a point about that last part. I mean, I'm only her second boyfriend, and she was in a 6-year relationship before we met. She'd only been single for about 3 weeks when we got together. I've had a bit more experience. I'm her 3rd sexual partner, and she's my 6th. 2 months ago, she finally broke me. Up until then, I'd stood firm, telling her I wasn't comfortable with any of this. Throughout that time, she was sweet, understanding, but also persistent. But on that particular day, she gave me an ultimatum. I told her, I don't think I'll ever be ready to share you with someone else. Her response hit me like a punch in the gut. Maybe we should take some time apart. I was floored. Are you serious? She looked sad, with tears forming in her eyes, and said, yeah, I just feel confined. I understand that you don't want this, but I think I need to experience other things. Maybe this isn't for us, but I need to try. I don't want a divorce, but maybe we should take some time apart to figure out what we want. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you want a divorce? Am I just not enough for you anymore? She softened a little and said, it's not that you're not enough. I just want to be open to new experiences, to meet people, and not be bound by societal rules or expectations. I don't want a divorce. I want you. But I feel like I need to explore this, and you don't. Maybe some time apart would help us figure things out. That's when I caved. Fine, I'll give it a try, I said, and she immediately perked up. But can we take it slow and come up with some basic rules? Lauren, clearly excited but trying to keep her cool, said, yes, we can take our time. Thank you. I really think this will be good for us in the long run. She then initiated sex, and I went along with it, even though I still felt uneasy. Fast forward to a few hours ago, and we were having dinner with the couple we're apparently supposed to swing with. Most of the night, I was making small talk with Jenna, a sweet and attractive 21-year-old. She's definitely my type physically, but the whole situation feels so bizarre. Lauren, on the other hand, was practically flirting with Jenna's boyfriend, Ryan, like they'd been doing this for years. He's a good-looking guy, I won't lie, but everything just feels way too convenient. I can't shake the feeling that this was Lauren's plan from the start. Jenna and I, however, seemed far more hesitant about the whole thing. She was nice, but there was definitely an awkwardness between us. Lauren keeps insisting that this couple wants to swing with us because they're new to it too. But deep down, I have this nagging suspicion that something's been going on between my wife and Ryan. It just feels too coincidental to ignore. When I caved and told Lauren we could try an open relationship and that I'd like to take things really slow, she took that to mean waiting until the next day was slow enough. I figured we would really sit down, talk through rules, read some books on E&M, ethical non-monogamy, and take it one step at a time. The next morning, I woke up a little later than usual, and Lauren had already been up for a while. She'd made us both Tinder profiles, like she really put a lot of effort into setting them up. I tried to tell her this was moving too fast, but she countered with, "It's just about being ready for when we are ready. It could take months for either of us to match with someone. We can still take it slow, but now this part is done, and we can start making matches while figuring the rest out." I begrudgingly accepted that. However, within 24 hours, she already had around 20 matches. That number kept climbing as the days went by. We'd try to talk about how we wanted things to go, but she was constantly distracted by her phone blowing up with notifications. Within 4 days, she was already messaging a few guys. 3 weeks later, she had her first date scheduled. We had gone over the rules and boundaries we both agreed to follow. She reluctantly agreed to some of them, but we had an understanding. The basics were, use protection every time, no physical contact on the first date, be home by the agreed upon time, or communicate if plans changed, and give each other details about the dates, location, who the person was, for safety reasons. Most importantly, we agreed our relationship came first. No canceling plans with each other for the sake of someone else. A lot of those rules went out the window on her first date. We had only been open for 3 weeks. She told me she'd be home by 11 p.m., but she didn't walk through the door until 12:30 a.m. I was still awake, and I was pissed. Not only had she come home late, but she hadn't even bothered to send a text. It was pretty obvious she'd done something with this guy. She tried to get intimate with me, but I was having none of it. I was done. I told her she was way past the time she promised, didn't communicate at all, and that I was sure she crossed the line. She didn't deny it, just gave me the excuse that things escalated and she got caught up in the moment. She promised to do better next time, saying now that she understood how things could get exciting, she'd have a plan to manage it better. Then she tried to convince me to reclaim her, but I flat out refused. That's when she got angry, stormed off, and said she was going to shower. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The next morning, I had made up my mind. I was done. I went into the bedroom and started packing a bag. Lauren woke up and asked, "What are you doing?" I told her, "I'm leaving." She looked alarmed and said, "Where are you going? What do you mean you're leaving?" I replied, "I'm done. I'm going to my sister's. I'm not going to just sit around the house while you're out on dates. You pushed me onto those forums to convince me, but I read a lot more than just the ones you cherry-picked. Here's the reality of most of those stories. You'll sift through tons of matches, picking and choosing who you want, while I go months, maybe even years without a match. Eventually, we'll resent each other, and we'll end up divorced. I'm just skipping to the end." She interrupted, "You had one match." I shot back angrily, "We both know that was a bot." She jumped up then and put her hands on me. Okay, I'm sorry, you're right. We're moving too fast. Please don't go. We can work this out. We can find a balance that works for both of us. You're just upset right now. Let's calm down and really talk about this. I promise, nothing like last night will happen again. Trust me, we can fix this." And there I was, caving again. I cave a lot. We finally had the deep conversation we should have had from the beginning, before we did anything. The talk we'd needed, but that she had been too distracted to have earlier. That conversation is what led to today. Having dinner with Lauren and another couple, doing a vibe check. Dinner went fine. Lauren and Ryan definitely vibed, which, to be honest, annoyed the hell out of me. I tried my best to act normal. I think Jenna was doing the same thing. As the night went on and it became obvious that our significant others were way more interested in each other than us, Jenna and I started talking about the elephant in the room. While neither of us said it outright, I think we both knew. We didn't really want any of this, and now we were just going along for the ride. At least, that's how it seemed to me. Before we all left, Jenna and I traded numbers. I'm thinking of texting her tomorrow just to see if any of this was really her idea or if she's in the same boat as me. I only have one more day until we're supposed to head over to Olivia's house on Saturday night for a play party. Honestly, this whole thing makes me feel like we're rushing into it. We've never done anything like this before, but apparently we're jumping into a swinger party with 10 other couples. Lauren keeps telling me it's not what I'm imagining and that I don't have to do anything I don't want to, but she insists we should go and check it out. She says we're just going to see if this is something we want to try, and if we're into it, we can go ahead with Ryan and Jenna. I guess I'm going because I'm dumb enough to let this train wreck keep going. To be honest, I keep thinking that Jenna's really attractive, and if Lauren keeps pissing me off and messing around, I might just say screw it and see what happens. My login 27M, wife Lauren 26F of 2 years pressured me into an open relationship, and that almost ended our marriage right there. But instead of working to fix things between us, she shifted gears to swinging so she could keep sleeping with her coworker, Ryan 27M. So we tried that, but apparently Jenna and I didn't do it right, which triggered a huge argument between Lauren and me. I went into that argument determined to get the truth out of her, but it turned out easier than I expected. She was so furious that she just blurted everything out in her anger, like it was somehow my fault. As I listened to Lauren rant about what I should have done, it hit me that all of this was about her living out some fantasy she'd built in her head. She expected me to be focused on her while she was with Ryan. I still can't wrap my head around how she thought that was going to work. She and Ryan wanted to sleep together, but didn't want to risk their current situations. They didn't want Jenna and me to hit it off. They assumed we'd just go along with their plan, but all I ended up being was an obstacle. Lauren didn't want to let go of me, but she also wanted to mess around with other people. What she really wanted was a one-sided, open relationship, but she couldn't make it work. And when I got a taste of it, she couldn't handle that. As she kept ranting, I realized our marriage was over. I never asked for any of this E&M stuff. She did. Well, she got what she wanted, and I hope it was worth it. I told her I wanted a divorce, packed a bag that night, and got myself a hotel room for a few days. I also texted Jenna to check in on her. She had a huge fight with Ryan, which ended with her breaking up with him and leaving their apartment. She's actually in a better spot than I am. She wasn't on the lease since she had only moved in with him a few months ago. They weren't married, but I am. I talked to a divorce lawyer on Monday, just 2 days after everything blew up, and she said she could have papers drawn up and served by the end of the week. I've got some savings and plan to break our lease and find my own place. Jenna stayed with me for the 3 days I was at the hotel, and I can't deny that I'm really falling for her. We spent those 3 days getting to know each other, and honestly, I could have kept talking to her for another 3 days straight. There's definitely a connection, and it's not just some leftover adrenaline from the party. The passion between us was real. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. After the 3 days, I went back to the apartment to grab some of my stuff. I'm staying with my sister for now, but I've got a lead on an apartment of my own, though it won't be ready until next weekend. Lauren wasn't there when I came by, and she hasn't texted me either. That's pretty typical of her. Giving me the cold shoulder was always her go-to move. It used to drive me crazy, but now I'm just grateful for the silence. It's Friday night, and I just got word that the divorce papers were served today. My lawyer told me Lauren didn't even react. I'm sure she wasn't surprised. This should be a straightforward process. We rented, had separate bank accounts, no kids, and this is a no-fault state. Honestly, I keep waiting to feel sad or angry, but all I feel is relief. These past few months have been too hard. I loved her, but what she put me through wasn't fair, and I've got a lot of resentment built up. I've been texting Jenna non-stop since she went back to her parents' house on Wednesday. I asked her out on a real date tonight, but she had a family thing, so we made plans for tomorrow. I feel like a teenager. I'm so nervous, which makes no sense since we've already slept together several times. It's just that I've had too much time to think. I'm obsessing over where to take her, what I should wear, whether I should get a haircut tomorrow. It just feels different, even more intense than when I first started dating Lauren. Anyway, that's the update. It's been a strange few months and an even stranger week, but I think things are finally going my way. The pain of my marriage is being replaced by excitement for what's next. Maybe it's just NRE, new relationship energy talking, but at this point, I don't have anything to lose by seeing where this goes. I, Logan, 30, started a new job about 6 months ago. I switched companies to become the director of projects at this new place, and it came with a huge pay increase. At the time, they were looking to hire both a director and an assistant director, so it was an exciting opportunity for me. On my first day, I had an early meeting with the VP. Both the assistant director and I were going to be introduced to the team that day. I arrived first and was chatting with the VP when the assistant director showed up. To my complete shock, it was Ryan, 30M, the same guy my ex-wife cheated with. The look on his face was priceless. I'm sure I looked surprised too, but the way his eyes nearly popped out of his head was actually kind of funny in hindsight. The VP was confused by the tension, but we both played it off. The rest of the day went on as usual. Tense, but manageable. At the end of the day, Ryan approached me wanting to talk. I cut him off before he could say much. "I don't need to hear anything from you unless it's about work. I don't know how you got this position, but you better do your job and do it well because I'll be watching closely," I told him sternly before walking away. He stopped me and said, "I'm qualified for this position. I know you think I'm just a piece of crap, and I'm sorry for everything, but I'll prove to you that I'm worthy of this chance." As I kept walking away, he called out, "By the way, I left Lauren." I didn't believe him, not for a second. Why would I? This guy played a huge role in wrecking my marriage. But in the 6 months we've worked together, he's actually proven to be a valuable asset. He knows his stuff, always meets deadlines, and has never given me a reason to doubt his work. I still only speak to him about work, keeping everything professional and distant. He's friendly but respectful toward me and the other staff. And he's never once brought up Jenna or Lauren since that first day. Lately, though, I've started to feel bad. I talk to the other staff more personally, asking about their weekends or their families. I never ask Ryan anything outside of work. I started noticing that he never got invited to the Friday hangouts with the rest of the staff. Out of curiosity, I asked the blunt, no-filter intern why Ryan was being left out. He told me, "Well, first off, everyone loves you, especially compared to the last guy. Ellie picked up on you not liking him, so we all figured there's got to be a reason for that, and we keep our distance from him." Damn. He was being exiled because of me, and that didn't seem fair. Despite our history, he's been a great team member and hasn't done anything to deserve being excluded. So, over the past few months, I've started being more personable with him. I ask how he's doing, how his weekend was, and we've even talked about sports, which led to more casual conversations. We actually have a lot in common. I still don't particularly like him because of our history, but sometimes I feel like Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights, wondering, why am I still talking to you? Anyway, the rest of the team noticed and started being friendlier with him too. I heard he got invited to a poker night recently, so I guess mission accomplished on that front. Now I'm at a crossroads. I have to evaluate all the employees in my department, and I can recommend them for termination, renewal, or transfer to another department. There's another assistant director position open in the company, and if I recommend Ryan for the transfer, I'm sure it would be approved. It's a lateral move. He'd make the same salary, just in a different department. He's been a great asset to my team, but I'm not sure if I want to continue working with him long term. Edit. Okay, I hear you. You all want an update on what happened with Jenna. Well, here it is. We were good for a while. Our relationship was fun and exciting, but when we hit the 7-month mark, things started to change. I began to feel insecure about her, which I know was my own issue, stemming from the trauma I went through with my marriage. It was a me problem. I became a little suffocating, and I had a lot of anxiety when she was on her phone or going out without me. That led to some passive-aggressive behavior on my part, and I take full responsibility for that. We talked about it a lot, though. At the same time, Jenna was nearing her graduation and working toward her BSN. She was only 21 when we got together, and had mostly been in long-term relationships. She had just gotten out of a controlling relationship with Ryan when we started dating. She often told me how much more confident she felt after leaving him. I could see that she was changing, becoming a stronger, more independent person. She wanted to explore that independence and discover herself more fully. Meanwhile, I sought out therapy to deal with the baggage from my failed marriage, which I'd never really processed. Jenna sought out her independence. Ultimately, we made the mutual decision to end things. It was very amicable. We stayed friends, and I was even invited to her family graduation party, which went well despite a bit of lingering awkwardness. We still talk here and there on social media, but we've both moved on with our lives. Sorry if this isn't the dramatic story you were hoping for. I think if we had met a few years later, it might have led to something more, but for where we both were at the time, it was a case of right person, wrong time. Who knows, maybe we'll reconnect one day, but I'm not holding my breath, especially since I've seen that she started dating someone else.